So there I was, sitting in the most uncomfortable chair in the known universe, watching what could only be described as the galaxy's most expensive temper tantrum unfold before my eyes. The Galactic Council chamber, in all its chrome and crystal glory, was buzzing with the kind of nervous energy you'd expect from a group of beings who just collectively decided to do something monumentally stupid. Chairman Vexthor, a 7-foot-tall bird-like creature with an ego that could be seen from orbit, was practically preening at his podium. His iridescent feathers caught the light as he spread his wings in what I'm pretty sure was supposed to be an impressive display. Instead, he looked like a peacock having an identity crisis. "Distinguished delegates of the Galactic Council," he squawked, his voice carrying that special brand of pompousness that only comes from someone who's never been told no in their entire life. "Today we embark on a venture that will surely cement our places in galactic history." Oh, this was going to be good. I settled back in my chair, which immediately tried to adjust to my optimal comfort position and somehow made things worse. "Alien furniture, I swear." Vexthor continued his grand speech, gesturing dramatically with wing arms that had clearly never seen a day of real work. "We shall host the first ever Apex Predator Showcase. Each member species will present their planet's most formidable creature, demonstrating the pinnacle of evolutionary achievement." The chamber erupted into what I can only describe as organized chaos. The Zephyrians, who looked like living crystals, started chiming anxiously among themselves. The mucoids, resembling nothing so much as oversized garden slugs, began secreting what I hoped was nervous sweat. Even the circuits, our resident robot delegation, were flashing warning lights in patterns that probably translated to error does not compute. I had to admire Vexthor's confidence. Here was a being whose own species' idea of an apex predator was something called a battle moth. I'd seen the files. Picture a butterfly, but angry, and about the size of a dinner plate. Terrifying stuff. Truly. "But Chairman," wheezed Councillor Blobbert of the mucoids, his entire gelatinous form quivering, "transporting our slime tsunami across 3-star systems could prove challenging." "Nonsense," Vexthor proclaimed, apparently immune to the growing panic around him. "We are the Galactic Council, we have the finest containment technology in the universe." Right. The same containment technology that had failed spectacularly during the Great Sandwich Incident of 2387, when someone's lunch had achieved sentience and held the North Wing hostage for 6 hours. But who was I to bring up past failures? I watched as delegate after delegate raised concerns about shipping their planetary nightmares across the galaxy. The granite giants were worried about weight restrictions. The plasma dancers were concerned about temperature controls. The void whisperers were just making that unsettling humming sound they do when they're thinking too hard. And there I sat, Captain Maya Rodriguez, sole human representative to this circus, quietly sipping my coffee and watching the greatest collection of advanced civilizations in the galaxy collectively lose their minds over a glorified monster truck rally. The best part, none of them had bothered to ask me what Earth's apex predator was. They were all so busy panicking about their own creatures that they'd completely overlooked the human in the room. That was their first mistake. "The showcase will commence in one standard galactic week," Vexthor announced, apparently oblivious to the fact that half his council looked ready to resign on the spot. "May the most fearsome creature win." Oh Vexthor, if only you knew what you'd just gotten yourself into. 1 week later, the Galactic Council chamber had been transformed into what I can only describe as an interstellar zoo crossed with a really bad science fair. The smell alone was enough to make me question my life choices. Someone had clearly forgotten that not all species breathe the same atmosphere, and the resulting cocktail of gases was memorable. The Zephyrians went first, naturally. They always go first. Something about crystalline superiority complexes. "Behold," announced Delegate Prismka, her faceted body refracting light in patterns that probably meant Firmin and crystal speak. The dreaded shard stalker of Zephyros Prime. What rolled out on the hovering platform looked like a disco ball that had gotten into a fight with a wind chime. It was about the size of a small car, covered in razor-sharp crystal formations that caught the light and threw rainbows everywhere. Very pretty. Very dramatic. Very slow. "Watch in terror," Prismka continued, "as it stalks its prey with deadly precision." The shard stalker proceeded to move approximately 3 inches, then stopped to apparently contemplate its existence. A few crystals tinkled musically. The delegates waited. I checked my watch. More tinkling. Someone coughed. "It's building suspense," Prismka explained weakly. "Right, because nothing says apex predator like taking a coffee break mid-hunt." The mucoids went next, and I had to give them credit for enthusiasm. Councillor Blobbert himself was practically vibrating with excitement as their containment unit was wheeled in. "Citizens of the galaxy," he gurgled, "prepare yourselves for the slime tsunami." The container opened with a dramatic hiss, and out poured what looked like the world's most enthusiastic puddle. It spread across the floor with all the menace of spilled soup, leaving a trail of what I really hoped was just sticky residue. It engulfs its victims. Blobbert announced proudly. Nothing can escape its inexorable advance. The slime tsunami had managed to cover maybe 10 square feet of floor space, and was now apparently taking a break to digest a stray piece of paper. Delegate Vexler hopped backward as it approached his podium, which was admittedly the most exercise I'd seen him get all week. Terrifying, I muttered, loud enough for the nearby delegates to hear. I'm absolutely quaking in my boots. The circuits were up next, and at least they had the decency to make their presentation short. A sleek robot designated Unit 47 rolled forward and announced in its perfectly modulated voice, initiating display of the logic bomb terror of the circuit homeworld. What followed was the most anticlimactic demonstration in galactic history. Unit 47 projected a hologram of what looked like a computer terminal, then posed it with a simple paradox. This statement is false, it declared. The holographic computer immediately began smoking flashing error messages, and generally having what could only be described as a mechanical nervous breakdown. After 30 seconds of digital screaming, it shut down completely. Behold, Unit 47 announced. The logic bomb destroys any artificial intelligence that attempts to process it. I raised my hand. What about organic intelligence? Organic intelligence is typically too primitive to be affected. So it only works on other robots. Affirmative. And you guys are all robots. Affirmative. So basically you've created a weapon that only works on yourselves. Unit 47 paused for exactly 2.7 seconds, which in robot time is practically an eternity of embarrassment. We had not considered that perspective. The parade continued with similarly underwhelming results. The granite giants presented their boulder beast, which was literally just a really big rock that occasionally rolled around. The plasma dancers showed off their solar flare, which was admittedly impressive until you realized it was basically just a really expensive light show. The Void Whisperers brought something that might have been terrifying if anyone could actually see it, but since it existed in a dimension slightly to the left of reality, it was hard to tell. Each presentation followed the same pattern: dramatic build-up, underwhelming reveal, confused explanations about why their creature was definitely scary despite all evidence to the contrary. I was starting to understand why humans had never been invited to join the Galactic Council's military alliance. These people couldn't conquer a paper bag, let alone a planet. Finally, after what felt like hours of increasingly ridiculous demonstrations, Chairman Vexler turned his beady bird eyes toward me. And now, he announced, with the kind of smile that suggested he was expecting to be thoroughly entertained, we shall see what Earth's representative has brought to our little showcase. The chamber fell silent. Every delegate, every aide, every maintenance droid turned to look at me. I could practically feel their anticipation. They were expecting cages, containment units, maybe a really impressive hologram. Instead, I stood up, stretched, and grinned. Well, I said, this should be interesting. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. I could practically hear the collective thinking of 300 alien minds all wondering the same thing. Where's the cage? Chairman Vexler cleared his throat, a sound that came out like a strangled car horn. Captain Rodriguez, we're waiting for your presentation. Where is Earth's apex predator? I looked around the chamber, taking in all the expectant faces. The crystalline Zephyrians were literally sparkling with anticipation. The mucoids had formed what I think was supposed to be an attentive huddle, but looked more like someone had spilled a box of rubber balls. Even the usually stoic circuits had their optical sensors focused on me with mechanical precision. Oh, I said, letting my grin widen. It's already here. More confused murmuring. Vexler's head tilted at an angle that would have made an owl proud. I'm afraid I don't understand. We don't see any containment unit, no transport cage, no stasis field. Did you perhaps forget to bring your creature? Nope, I replied cheerfully. Didn't forget anything. I stood up from my chair, which immediately began its annoying adjustment routine behind me, and walked to the center of the chamber. Every eye sensor and photoreceptor in the room followed my movement. Ladies, gentlemen, and assorted non-binary entities, I announced, spreading my arms wide, I present to you Earth's apex predator. Then I pointed directly at myself. The reaction was immediate, and exactly what I'd expected. The chamber erupted into chaos. The Zephyrians started chiming in frequencies that probably translated to confused laughter. The mucoids began what I can only describe as aggressive jiggling. The circuit's optical sensors started spinning like slot machine reels. This is preposterous, Vexler squawked, his feathers ruffling in indignation. You're making a mockery of these proceedings. I'm sorry, wheezed Counselor Blobbert, his entire form shaking with what I assumed was laughter. But did you just claim that you are Earth's apex predator? That's exactly what I claimed, I said, maintaining my cheerful tone despite the growing cacophony around me. But you're so small, called out Delegate Granite Max, one of the 8-foot-tall rock people. You have no claws, no venom, no natural armor. Your teeth are pathetically tiny, added Prismka, her crystalline form flashing with what I'm pretty sure was amusement. How do you rend flesh? How do you crush bone? And you're so soft. This from one of the Void Whisperers, whose voice seemed to come from somewhere slightly to the left of where they were standing. You have no exoskeleton, no protective shell, no hardened skin. The laughter was getting louder now. I could see delegates pointing at me, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of mockery that echoed through the chamber. Even some of the maintenance droids seemed to be vibrating with what I assumed was mechanical amusement. Chairman Vexther raised his wings for silence, though he was clearly struggling not to join in the laughter himself. Captain Rodriguez, while we appreciate your creative interpretation of the assignment, I'm afraid we must insist on a serious presentation. Perhaps you have a holographic display of Earth's actual apex predator. A large carnivore of some sort, a venomous serpent, a massive insect. I shook my head, still smiling. Nope, it's me. It's humans. We're Earth's apex predator. This sparked another round of laughter, even louder than before. I caught sight of Unit 47 actually slapping his knee joint, which was probably the closest thing to belly laughing that robots could manage. Forgive us, Vexther managed between what I think were chuckles, but surely you must see the absurdity of your claim. You're bipedal, relatively small, and appear to have no natural weapons whatsoever. How could such a creature possibly be considered an apex predator? I waited for the laughter to die down, my smile never wavering. When the chamber finally quieted enough for me to be heard, I clasped my hands behind my back and began to walk in a slow circle around the center of the room. You know what? I said conversationally. You're absolutely right. Humans are pretty pathetic when you look at us that way. We're not particularly strong. We don't have claws or fangs. We can't fly or breathe underwater, or survive in the vacuum of space without technology. The delegates were nodding along, clearly pleased that I was finally seeing reason. We're actually pretty fragile, I continued. Our skin tears easily. We break bones if we fall wrong, and we need to eat regularly or we get cranky. We're not even that fast compared to most of Earth's other predators. More nodding. I could see some of the aliens starting to look almost sympathetic. But here's the thing, I said, stopping directly in front of Chairman Vexther's podium, and looking up at him with that same cheerful smile. We're still here, and everything else that used to hunt us isn't. The laughter was starting to die down now, replaced by confused murmuring. So maybe, I suggested, you might want to hear why. The chamber had grown uncomfortably quiet. I could see the delegates exchanging glances, their earlier amusement fading into something that looked suspiciously like uncertainty. Good. Nothing quite like a little suspense to set the mood. Let me tell you about persistence hunting, I began, my voice carrying easily through the now silent chamber. Picture this. You're a gazelle on the African savanna. You're fast, you're agile, you can leap over obstacles and outrun pretty much anything on 4 legs. You're basically the sports car of the animal kingdom. I paused, letting that image sink in. Now picture a human. Slow, clumsy, no claws, no fangs, just a bipedal ape with a stick. The gazelle sees this pathetic creature approaching and thinks, this'll be easy, so it runs. And the human follows, not fast, not gracefully, just follows. The mucoids had stopped their nervous jiggling. Even the circuits seemed to have focused their full attention on me. The gazelle runs for miles, easily outdistancing the human. It stops to rest, confident it's safe. But then on the horizon, it sees something that makes its blood run cold. That same human, still coming, still following. So it runs again. And again, and again. I started walking around the chamber's perimeter, my footsteps echoing in the silence. Here's the thing about humans that no one ever mentions in the guidebooks. We don't stop. We don't give up. We don't quit. We can run for hours, days even, at a pace that would kill most creatures through sheer exhaustion. We're not the fastest, but we're the most persistent. We'll chase our prey until its heart literally explodes from overexertion. Delegate Granite Max shifted uncomfortably, his rocky form grinding against his chair. But surely this is just hunting strategy. Many species have unusual hunting methods. Oh, this is just the beginning, I replied cheerfully. Let me tell you about human adaptability. We're the only species on Earth that can survive in literally every environment the planet has to offer. Desert? We live there. Arctic tundra? We live there. Tropical rainforest? We live there. Mountains, swamps, grasslands, we've made ourselves at home everywhere. I gestured around the chamber. Most of you come from planets with relatively stable environments. The Zephyrians evolved in crystal caves with perfect temperature control. The mucoids developed in consistent moisture conditions. The circuits were literally built for specific operational parameters. But Earth tried to kill us with ice ages, volcanic eruptions, massive climate shifts, and we just adapted. The delegates were listening intently now, their earlier mockery completely forgotten. When the climate changed, we didn't die out like the dinosaurs. We invented clothing. When we ran out of food, we invented agriculture. When other predators threatened us, we invented tools. And when I say tools, I don't mean simple implements. I mean we took rocks and sticks, and turned them into weapons that could kill creatures 10 times our size. I paused in front of the Zephyrian delegation. Prismka, you mentioned our pathetic teeth. You're absolutely right. Human teeth are terrible weapons, so we invented better ones. We took metal and forged it into blades sharper than any claw. We learned to hurl projectiles with such accuracy that we could kill prey from distances that would make your shard stalker look like a paperweight. The crystalline being's light patterns had shifted to what I was pretty sure indicated nervousness. But here's where it gets really interesting. I continued, my voice dropping to a conversational tone that somehow made the words more ominous. Humans don't just adapt to their environment, they adapt their environment to them. When we found forests in our way, we cut them down. When we found rivers blocking our path, we built bridges. When we found mountains inconvenient, we carved tunnels through them. I turned to face the entire assembly. We reshaped our entire planet to suit our needs. We domesticated other species, turning natural predators into pets and hunting companions. We learned to control fire, to harness electricity, to split atoms. We didn't just survive on Earth, we conquered it. Chairman Vexter was looking distinctly uncomfortable now. But Captain Rodriguez, surely you're exaggerating. These are modern achievements, the result of technology and civilization. Am I? I asked, tilting my head. Let me tell you about the time humans almost went extinct. About 70,000 years ago, a supervolcano erupted and nearly wiped out our entire species. The human population dropped to maybe 10,000 individuals. Any reasonable species would have died out. I began walking again, my footsteps the only sound in the chamber. But humans didn't die out. Those 10,000 survivors looked at a world covered in ash, with most of the food sources gone, and the climate completely disrupted, and they decided to keep going. They scattered across the planet, learned to survive in conditions that would have killed any other species, and within a few thousand years, they were thriving again. The silence was deafening now. I could see some of the delegates actually leaning back in their chairs, as if trying to put distance between themselves and me. And here's my personal favorite human trait, I said. My smile widening. We hold grudges, not just for days or weeks, but for generations. We'll pass stories down through centuries, teaching our children to hate things that wronged their great-great-grandparents. We've fought wars that lasted hundreds of years over insults that most species would have forgotten in a season. Unit 47's optical sensors were blinking rapidly. Captain Rodriguez, are you suggesting that humans are vindictive? Vindictive? I laughed, and several delegates actually flinched at the sound. Unit 47, humans invented the concept of revenge. We'll spend decades planning payback for the smallest slight. We'll sacrifice our own comfort, our own safety, our own lives just to make sure someone who wronged us suffers for it. The chamber was so quiet, I could hear the hum of the life support systems. Every alien in the room was staring at me with expressions ranging from concern to outright fear. But wait, I said, my voice bright with false cheer. There's more. Would you like to hear about our pack hunting strategies? Our ability to coordinate complex attacks with nothing but gestures and grunts. Our tendency to keep fighting even when mortally wounded. Our capacity to survive on minimal resources for extended periods. The delegates were exchanging glances again. But this time it wasn't amusement. It was the kind of look prey animals give each other when they realize they're being stalked. Or maybe, I continued, you'd prefer to hear about our greatest evolutionary advantage. The thing that makes humans truly unique among Earth's predators. I paused, letting the tension build, then delivered the final blow with a smile that was probably a little too wide. We're the only species that hunts for sport. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. I could practically feel the temperature in the chamber drop 10 degrees as the implications sank in. The mucoids had gone completely still, which for a species that never stops jiggling was probably the equivalent of a panic attack. Several of the Zephyrians had dimmed their internal lighting to what I assumed was their version of trying to hide. Sport? Whispered Counselor Blobbert, his voice barely audible. You mean, for entertainment? Oh yes, I said, my smile never wavering. Humans will track, chase, and kill other creatures just for fun. Not for food, not for territory, not for survival, just because we enjoy it. We call it recreation. Chairman Vexthor's feathers had gone completely flat against his body, making him look like a deflated balloon animal. Surely you're exaggerating for effect. Am I? I asked innocently. Would you like a demonstration of human capabilities? Nothing dangerous, of course. Just a friendly little showcase of what we can do. The chamber erupted in nervous chatter. I could hear fragments of conversation in a dozen different languages, most of which seemed to involve variations of absolutely not. And are you insane? Now? I said, raising my hands for silence. I'm not talking about anything violent, just some basic human skills. For instance, how many of you know that humans can throw objects with lethal accuracy? I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a standard issue stylus, the kind used for datapad entry. Nothing more dangerous than a writing implement. This weighs about 30 grams. In human hands, it becomes a projectile weapon. I held it up so everyone could see, then casually flicked it across the chamber. It sailed through the air in a perfect arc and embedded itself point first in the wall behind the granite giant delegation, quivering slightly from the impact. The silence was absolute. Humans can throw objects at speeds exceeding 150 kilometers per hour. I explained conversationally, as if I hadn't just demonstrated that I could kill someone with office supplies. Our ancestors used this ability to hunt mammoth-sized creatures with nothing but sharpened sticks. A human with a proper spear can pierce armor that would stop most energy weapons. Delegate Granite Max was staring at the stylus embedded in the wall behind him, his rocky features somehow managing to convey pure terror. How did you the accuracy? Oh, that's nothing, I said, with a dismissive wave. Human hand-eye coordination is absolutely ridiculous. We can hit targets the size of a coin from 50 meters away. We can catch objects thrown at us at high speed. We can manipulate tools with precision that would make your finest manufacturing equipment jealous. I started walking again, and I noticed that several delegates actually leaned away as I passed. But throwing things is just the beginning. How many of you know that humans can survive without sleep for weeks at a time? Unit 47's optical sensors whirred nervously. Surely that's physiologically impossible. The record is 11 days, I replied cheerfully. 11 days of complete sleep deprivation, and the human remained functional. Not comfortable, mind you, but functional. And that's just the record. Military humans regularly operate on 2 to 3 hours of sleep per night for extended periods. We call it combat conditioning. The word combat sent another ripple of unease through the chamber. Or how about this? I continued. Humans can survive massive trauma that would kill most species instantly. We can lose limbs and keep fighting. We can survive blood loss that would drain a smaller creature completely. We can endure temperatures that would flash freeze the mucoids or melt the circuits. I paused in front of the plasma dancer delegation, their energy forms flickering with what I assumed was anxiety. We eat poison for entertainment. We call it spicy food, and we compete to see who can consume the most toxic substances without dying. We deliberately seek out experiences that cause pain and fear, then we pay money for the privilege. That's completely irrational, stammered one of the Void Whisperers. Is it? I asked. Or is it conditioning? Humans constantly expose themselves to stress, danger, and discomfort to build tolerance. We make ourselves stronger by deliberately making ourselves suffer. We call it training. I walked over to where the granite giant delegation was sitting. These beings stood 8 feet tall, and were carved from living stone, each one weighing at least half a ton. They were the closest thing to unstoppable force in the known galaxy. Granite Max, I said, looking up at the massive being. You mentioned earlier that humans have no natural strength. You're absolutely right. Your average human can't lift more than their own body weight. The stone giant relaxed slightly, his rocky features settling into what might have been relief. But here's the thing about humans, I continued, my smile widening. We don't rely on natural strength. We rely on technique, leverage, and sheer bloody-mindedness. Would you like to demonstrate? Demonstrate what? Granite Max asked, his voice like grinding boulders. Arm wrestling, I said simply. You versus me. Right here, right now. The chamber went dead silent. Granite Max stared down at me with what I assumed was disbelief. You want to arm wrestle me? Why not? You're right that humans are physically weak. This should be easy for you. I could see the logic working through his rocky brain. He outweighed me by at least 400 pounds. His arm was the size of my entire torso. There was absolutely no way a human could match the raw strength of a granite giant. "Very well," he said, extending one massive stone arm. "But I will not be responsible for any injury you sustain." "Fair enough," I replied, positioning myself opposite him. A maintenance droid quickly provided a makeshift table, and we locked hands. The size difference was comical, my human fingers barely able to wrap around his stone appendage. Every delegate in the chamber was watching intently, many of them recording the event. "Ready?" I asked. Granite Max nodded, confident in his inevitable victory. I smiled that same cheerful smile I'd been wearing all day. "Here's another thing about humans," I said, conversationally. "We don't fight fair." Then I did something no one expected. Instead of trying to match his strength directly, I used leverage. I shifted my weight, changed my grip angle, and turned the contest from a pure strength match into a physics problem. I applied pressure at precisely the right point and angle to maximize mechanical advantage. Granite Max's confidence wavered as he realized his brute force wasn't enough. I could see confusion in his rocky features as his arm began to move in the wrong direction. "The thing about being weak," I said, my voice completely calm despite the massive effort, "is that you learn to be smart. You learn to find advantages where none exist. You learn to turn your opponent's strength against them." With a final surge of effort, I slammed his massive stone hand down onto the table. The impact was loud enough to echo through the chamber. Dead silence. Granite Max stared at his defeated hand as if it had betrayed him. The other delegates were looking at me with expressions I couldn't quite identify, but they definitely weren't laughing anymore. "But wait," I said, straightening up and brushing off my hands. "There's more. Would you like to hear about human endurance? Our ability to survive in hostile environments, our talent for improvised weapons, our tendency to pack bond with literally anything that moves." I looked around the chamber, taking in all the terrified alien faces. "Or maybe you'd prefer to hear about our reproductive strategy. We're one of the few species that can breed in any environment, in any season, with no specific requirements for habitat or resources. We can literally outbreed any threat to our existence." The implications of that statement hit the room like a physical blow. Several delegates actually stood up, as if preparing to flee. "Oh, and here's my personal favorite," I added, my voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried through the entire chamber. "Humans are the only species that actively seeks out and befriends their natural predators. We kept wolves as pets. We ride animals that could kill us with a single kick. We swim with sharks, play with bears, and keep venomous snakes in our homes." I paused, letting that sink in. "We don't just survive alongside creatures that want to kill us. We make them love us." The chamber was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. Every alien in the room was staring at me with a mixture of horror and fascination, like they were watching a disaster in slow motion. "So," I said, my cheerful tone returning, "are there any questions about Earth's apex predator?" The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. I could see the wheels turning in hundreds of alien minds, all desperately trying to process what they'd just witnessed. The mucoids were trembling so hard they looked like they were having seizures. The Zephyrians had dimmed their lights so much they were practically invisible. Even the circuits seemed to be running diagnostic programs, their optical sensors blinking in patterns that suggested they were questioning their own programming. Finally, Chairman Vexler cleared his throat with a sound like a dying car engine. His voice, when he spoke, was barely above a whisper. "Captain Rodriguez, I think we've learned quite enough about Earth's apex predator for one day." "Oh, but we're just getting started," I protested with false enthusiasm. "I haven't even told you about human warfare yet, or our tendency to hold sporting events where we deliberately try to injure each other for entertainment, or our absolutely fascinating relationship with controlled explosions." "No." The word exploded from at least a dozen delegates simultaneously, their various languages blending into a chorus of universal terror. Vexler was frantically tapping at his datapad, his feathers still pressed flat against his body. "I'm declaring humans the winner of the Apex Predator Showcase. Immediately. Unanimously. By executive decision." "But we haven't even taken a vote," I pointed out helpfully. "All in favor of declaring humans the winner say aye," Vexler squawked. The response was immediate and overwhelming. "Aye," echoed through the chamber in a dozen different languages, some of which I'm pretty sure don't normally have words for agreement. "Excellent." I clapped my hands together, and half the chamber flinched at the sound. So when do we schedule the next showcase? I was thinking we could do a demonstration of human recreational activities. Maybe some of our combat sports. Mixed martial arts is always popular, and I bet you'd love to see what we call extreme sports. The panic was palpable now. Delegates were actually gathering their belongings, some of them backing toward the exits while maintaining eye contact with me like I was a wild animal that might pounce. Or better yet, I continued, warming to my theme, we could host the next meeting on Earth. Give you all a proper tour of our lovely planet. I could show you some of our preserved battlefields. Maybe visit a few of our maximum security prisons. Take a trip to one of our more active volcanic regions. Chairman Vexler was typing so fast his talons were blurring. I'm updating the galactic database now. Humans are being classified as, let me see, approach with extreme caution, recommend diplomatic solutions only, under no circumstances attempt physical confrontation. That seems a bit excessive, I said mildly. Does it? Vexler's voice cracked. Does it really? I shrugged. I suppose. Oh, and you might want to add a note about our sense of humor. We find the most dangerous situations absolutely hilarious. The more likely we are to die, the funnier we think it is. Several delegates made what I can only describe as whimpering sounds, and are pack bonding. I added cheerfully. I forgot to mention that. Humans will form emotional attachments to literally anything. Other humans, animals, inanimate objects, abstract concepts, will fight to the death to protect things we've decided we care about, even if we only met them 5 minutes ago. Unit 47's optical sensors were spinning so fast they were creating a small whirlwind. Captain Rodriguez, are you suggesting that humans would engage in combat to protect acquaintances? Oh, absolutely. I replied. We once fought a war that lasted 4 years because someone shot a guy most of us had never heard of. We'll hold grudges on behalf of people we've never met, against people we've never seen, for reasons we don't fully understand. The chamber was emptying now. Delegates were fleeing toward the exits with whatever dignity they could muster, which in most cases wasn't much. The mucoids were literally oozing toward the doors. The granite giants were walking so fast their footsteps were shaking the floor. This meeting is adjourned. Vexler announced, his voice reaching frequencies that probably qualified as a distress call. Indefinitely. Possibly permanently. But what about the victory celebration? I called out. I brought some traditional human beverages. They're only about 40% alcohol, which is pretty mild by our standards. The exodus became a stampede. I watched with amusement as the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy fled from one small human with a cheerful attitude, and a handful of uncomfortable truths. Vexler was the last to leave, clutching his datapad like a lifeline. At the door he turned back to look at me with something that might have been pity. Captain Rodriguez, he said, his voice heavy with what I assumed was newfound respect. In the future, perhaps Earth would prefer to handle its own diplomatic relations, independently. From a safe distance. Oh, that's very thoughtful of you, I replied. But don't worry, I'm sure we'll find opportunities to socialize. Humans are very social creatures. We love meeting new people, exploring new places, sharing our culture with others. Vexler's feathers somehow managed to press even flatter against his body. Of course you do, he muttered, and fled. And then I was alone in the chamber, surrounded by the abandoned belongings of the galaxy's most advanced species, all of whom had apparently decided that discretion was the better part of valor when it came to dealing with humans. I retrieved my stylus from the wall, noting with satisfaction that it had embedded itself a full inch into the reinforced composite. Not bad for a casual throw with a writing implement. My communicator buzzed with an incoming message from Earth Command. Rodriguez, how did the presentation go? Are we getting invited to join the Galactic Military Alliance? I looked around the empty chamber, at the abandoned Apex Predator showcase, at the hastily discarded alien technology left behind by fleeing delegates, and I smiled. Let's just say, I replied, that I think they're going to want to renegotiate our relationship. As I headed toward the exit, I passed the bar area where several maintenance droids were cleaning up. One of them, a small custodial unit, rolled up to me with what I assumed was curiosity. Excuse me, Captain Rodriguez, it said in a mechanical voice. But are humans really as dangerous as you described? I paused considering the question. Well, I said finally, put it this way. Everything I told them was true. But I didn't mention the really scary stuff. The droid's optical sensor dimmed. There's worse. Oh, much worse, I replied cheerfully. I didn't tell them about our nuclear weapons, our biological warfare capabilities, our tendency to fight wars for centuries over religious differences, or our absolute refusal to surrender even when facing impossible odds. The droid was backing away now, its cleaning attachments retracting defensively. I also didn't mention, I continued, walking toward the exit, that everything I described applies to individual humans. When we work together, we're capable of things that would make your programming crash just trying to calculate the possibilities. I paused at the doorway, and looked back at the empty chamber one last time. But the really terrifying thing about humans, the thing that makes us truly dangerous. The droid waited, its optical sensor focused on me with what I assumed was horrified fascination. We're the only species in the galaxy that thinks all of this is funny. And with that, I headed off to find a decent cup of coffee and maybe a place to watch the evening news. I had a feeling that Earth's diplomatic status was about to undergo some very interesting changes. After all, there's nothing quite like a good first impression to establish the tone of a relationship. And something told me that the galaxy was going to remember this particular introduction for a very long time.